Storygram Network.
Hello, we are the Sonoma Community Center podcast, a place of creativity, connection, and community. We highlight the artists, teachers, and the community that come through the doors of our historic brick building, often called the heart of Sonoma. We share local tips and shout-outs to our home, Sonoma Valley. And we are your hosts, Molly Spencer.
Gerardo Diaz.
We are the engagement team of the Sonoma Community Center. Woo, woo. Hi, this is Molly back at our podcast. It seems like we've stepped away for a while. Today, before I get into it, this is coming out in November. So unfortunately, we have missed Dia. You may have missed Dia, which is an annual thing that we do every year. Come again next year, as well as Scream for all you screamers out there. Hope you caught the last podcast episode. That's a good time. But today, I'm super excited. We have my co-host filling in for Gerardo today is Meg Billingham. You might recognize her from School of Clay.
I'm happy to be back. I don't have as many good food stories as G does, but I have some good
clay
stories.
Right? Yeah, but you know all things clay and beyond. And I'm also really excited because that means it's time to have our ceramics artists in residence on board today. And this fall, shall I say, winter 2024, Kate Rusek. Did I say it right? No, I knew it. Okay.
Kate Rusek, like running.
Rusek.
Like
And
Russia.
I feel like I've said it
Russian.
right before. I just messed it up.
It's cool. We were just locked in eye contact, and you might have gotten a little
exactly.
nervous.
On
It's
our
fine.
extremely long table. So we're here recording at the Sonoma Community Center in the old music room. And we always makeshift up, and we have this extremely long 8-foot table. So if it sounds like we're far away from each other, we are. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to
I'm
have
so happy
you.
to be here. This is such a treat.
You've been here since end of July or beginning
Mid-July.
of August?
Yeah.
You are one busy artist.
You know, I just try and keep it moving. If like the art world will have me, the universe will have me, and then I'm gonna show up. So here we are.
Exactly. And there's so much. I feel like you would do a better job of describing what you do. I know you're interdisciplinary artists. You're here mostly on ceramics, but there's so much more you do as well. You work in garments and sculpture, and I think you also do some performance as well. Do you do performance, or what is it like?
It's been a while. Well, I usually introduce myself as a sculptor because I think like sculpture is a broad medium at this point, and it encompasses performance. Like if you're performing with the objects and your body as a part of it, then to me that's sculpture. So I describe myself as a sculptor, and then I work in a bunch of different mediums. For me, so much of what I do is like almost exactly the same, but it looks so different. It is the approach. I'm so fascinated and entranced by the processes, like the systems of things, and that is in my studio and outside of my studio to like kind of bring in these inspirations of, you know, what I'm trying to explore. So I'm a sculptor. I make clothes. I make objects. I make functional objects and sculptural objects, and the sculptural objects become functional objects, depending on how you think about them.
You do not stay bored.
I do not. And that's the thing. It's just like, I genuinely feel like I have so much work to do in a beautiful way. Like none of it feels like I'm too busy or whatever. I'm the master of my own time because I have to be, because there's just so many questions to ask and so many things to make. And it's just like, it's the delight of my life. My practice is very entrenched and very intertwined in who I am, and like how I just move through the world.
See that. Yeah. I see that there are no boundaries on exploration for you.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
And because this is such an audio experience, I'd love to take people over to Instagram, because that's where I feel like they can see a lot of your work. And how do they find you there? And you're also based out of New York City. I think we've
at the
mentioned
moment
right now.
home base is New York City. I have jump out of New York City as much as I'm there, if not more, just because it really like feeds these inquiries, these questions I'm asking. But I'm on Instagram at the Kate Rusek, THE, my full name, KTERUSEK. And you can also find me on my website at katerusek.com.
I love it. I love it. I see that there's website or you're in a couple of galleries. I got really excited because in your garment series, it looks like you're making sort of these belt fanny pack situations. Are you still doing that?
I am doing that.
I want one.
Yes. Yes. So I kind of have a few different sort of streams of creative output, which some of it looks more like fine art, some of it looks more like design, some of it looks like collaboration with other people. But one of them, the thing you're talking about, is in addition to my practice, and maybe part of my practice is like I'm a distance runner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've been doing
amazing.
ultra marathons for the last couple of years, shooting for another big goal that like I'm speaking into the world, but like might not say in this podcast just because like it's a big one and I got to get prepared. But I've been doing some pretty long races, and in that, of course, like I'm making my own gear.
I love that.
Yeah, so I'm making running belts and some like camelback, like ultralight camelback
the DIY
kind of things.
runner.
Well, I mean, everything I touch is just something I want to see in the world, and so that includes the things that I put on my body and then I have around me and that are functional. And also, everything I make is made of trash.
And I love that.
Yes, you are the captive audience for that.
A side note: your time in Sonoma, have you had time to run?
Yeah.
In Sonoma?
Yes.
Do you like trail running?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I'm escaping to the hills. Like the Sonoma Community Center is so beautifully situated in walking, biking distance to all of these trails that lead you up into the hills. So I can find some elevation, because that is my favorite thing, is just to run up the mountain. It's the perfect balance for me to like, ideally, I am starting my day in the forest. I am coming into my studio, and I'm running out of the forest because I must come to my studio to download all the things that I've been thinking about all morning. Like that is like an ideal day for me.
Running up the mountain.
Yeah.
That is really summing you up, I feel like. Our ceramics artist in residence program, I can't say enough. I love everyone that comes through here and to see their work manifest.
I feel so lucky because so many of my friends and like people I look up to have been here.
Yeah.
Haley Jimenez was here just before me. Dan Clausen was here.
Ugh,
Dear friend now. Colby Carpenter was here.
Colby, yes. Colby was a while ago.
Sunshine Cobb was here ages ago, like near the beginning of the residency. Montana folks, we love them. So it's just
Have you been out as far as residencies go? Is it Red Lodge that's out there? Or where is that? That's
You're probably thinking of Archie Bray.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah. So Sunshine is an Archie Bray folk. Colby is an Archie Bray person. Colby, I also like followed him at a different residency in Pennsylvania after he had done it.
He's pretty particular. Yeah, he's like...
Colby predates me, but you were around with Colby time.
Exactly. Like Colby...
He's going to love we're talking about him.
Maxwell Mastardo.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Love his wild work.
Yeah. So like friends and like other people who I don't have personal relationships with, like Austin Taylor, but like we know each other from like the internet and like from friends of friends. And it's just like a beautiful group of people who've landed here that just like it continues to kind of like feed into I'm following people and people are following me. And it's just so nice to kind of be in spaces that have been so fruitful for people and to
I
take
feel
away
lucky that we have
those experiences.
Meg, it's so amazing to have it continued supporting artists. I think from each department, just speaking from like the dance department and other departments, we hope to have other artists coming through here too in many different mediums. And the ceramics has really set the bar to keep that going.
Yeah.
So
it feels like a really special place too.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel super privileged to be here. I know there's only one resident at a time, so it's like you build this cohort of artists over years and years because of the nature of the residency, and so I feel very, very humbled and privileged to be here.
So might I ask, before we go a little bit deeper dive into your ceramics work and the type of work that it is, do you have a name for the show? What is
I do. The title of the show is Filtering the Feast.
Filtering the beat?
Yeah. Filtering the feast.
Folks, I had an ear infection last week and I may be a little deaf. So excellent.
Yes, it's filtering the feast. And I mean, this is a, culmination, maybe not culmination in the sort of like finale sort of sense, but like this is the best work that I've made in this series. And it continues because it's just, the work takes a long time, first of all. So this body of work has been growing for the last 2 years, but I know more about it. It's teaching me things every single day about what I can do and what the capacities are. And like to get from start to finish takes quite a while. And so these are the most exciting things that I have made so far in the medium. And in that's kind of where the show title comes from. And this is sort of about parsing through the sort of like heartbreaking, but just incredibly breathtaking beauty that I see everywhere. It's that sprinting out of the forest after like downloading my surroundings and how luscious and abundant, and you see some devastation or some signs of the forest changing or our intervention in it, but it's still just remarkably brilliant. It just takes my breath away. And
magical.
So, yeah. And so like in my studio and in the work and the show, it's just like, how do I make sense of it? Or at least for me. And how do I make sense of it for me? And how do I share that perspective? Like, how do I share that lens of this sort of act of regeneration and this act of transformation that I hope is inspiring for people? And I want the objects also to like be full of questions and like, what is that? How does that, like, how does it make me feel? I'm attracted to it. I'm also scared of it. Like, I want all of those.
That's funny because I have looked at your work around here and it is, wow. Before we go even further there, just to bring it down to people that might not know ceramics, you work basically in sculpture is what you're doing right now. And the type of clay, porcelain?
Yes.
Yes. So for folks that, I've learned a thing or two over 8 years. Porcelain is the white clay, folks. And talk a little bit about how the difficulty or just the different ways working in porcelain. How is that different from working in other types of clay? Just for people that don't know.
Yeah. So porcelain just has a different sort of particulate makeup than some of our other clays, and sort of beyond that. And Kate can speak to how this really is impactful in her studio practice. It also has quite a fraught history, culturally and historically over a huge amount of time. So when you think about people and movement and sort of like cultural conflict, porcelain is this really fraught material that is also not always, practically speaking, the easiest to work with. And so there's this interesting relationship that's built there that people can sort of choose and endeavor into exploring also in their work. From like just like a very baseline understanding of porcelain, it can just be a little bit more finicky to work with, interact with water differently. It doesn't have sort of the same, it can have high levels of plasticity, so it can be very bendy, but also cannot. It has a fickleness to it that both sort of draws and makes people steer away from it as a material. And you use it in hand building and also in casting. So you have a particular way of engaging with it.
I mean, I came to porcelain sort of like as kismet because a ton of it was offered to me for free.
That's the best. You'll find that's a common introduction.
Yeah, but you know, like, I mean, I call myself a sculptor because most of my work in my career has been primarily from found object and from textiles and from like all of these waste materials, like in industry scale, like pre-consumer kind of things. And I came to a residency in 2022 at Goggleworks Center for the Arts. Shout out to Tim Compton, you're the best. With that in mind, to be making these sort of found object works, but like it's a beautifully flushed art center, kind of like this place where there's glass and there's ceramics and there's like the most gorgeous wood shop I've ever seen in my life. And as things go, sometimes it's like, we have 40 gallons of porcelain casting slip. You want to play around with it? I'm just like, hell yeah, I do. Like, this is part of my process, like my practice. It's like, let's see what this can do, you know? And I ask that over and over and over in every single sort of endeavor. And I just fell in love with it. There's just this luminous quality. There's sort of this luxury to it, but it is also just like a finicky beast. And also like I'm rougher with it than I think most artists are because I don't know any better.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled about that. You know, it's like I will hold on to that for as long as I possibly can. I mean, I know so much about the materiality of just art making and so many different materials and mediums. This one just felt like, I'm going to like tickle you and like, you know, and kind of mess around with it a little bit and just sort of see how far I can push it and where it kind of fissures and cracks and what it wants to do and what it doesn't want to do. And maybe I want it to do what it doesn't want to do. And then like let that kind of reveal, like that makes the work the most interesting to me when I can kind of have this back and forth conversation with the materials where I'm learning as much from the work as I'm inputting into it.
So the work that you have right now, that's upstairs, and it's mostly porcelain. And to me, it looks, and then there's this touch of, is it glaze, like a colored glaze on it? And they just look like breathing organisms, right? I don't know. There's something about it that's like frail yet strong altogether. Like you want to look closer, but I'm afraid to touch it. But also it seems like this concept that there are all these little almost cones and they're almost like an organism. And if there was not all of them, it's this little society.
Yeah.
Like you can't do it on your own, but if you have all these things supporting you, you can do something strong.
That theme of connectivity has been just so, it's like ingrained in me into like the marrow of me as an artist. And that comes from my love of cloth. That comes from my like intimate knowledge of cloth and garment from like a process standpoint. There's a lot of things to say about garment as identity, garment as cultural signifier, also cultural producer. And those are all very important to me too. But for me, it is the tactility of those materials. It is like, and who those materials were made by, like what animal and what piece of dirt literally grew this shirt. Do you know what I mean?
It really does look like something that may have grown out beautifully. You know, it's almost like it's something underwater. It just seems very...
For that's me thinking about the systems. And so there's this connectivity that exists on a lot of different levels, from like the micro to the macro, like from the sort of like literally microscopic to the, universal scale that I'm thinking about all the time. And I just love the poetry in that, and the fact that artists can elicit that scale shift like in a moment without having to over explain things or just, think about the climate change, but without having to like slap you over the head with it. And you can just look at an object and elicit like, oh, this thing is strong because of its connective tissue. It's strong because this one part is replicated over a broad scape of space. And now it exists as this colony. It exists as this.
Yeah, I can appreciate it. It makes you think. As you said, it makes you stop and think. And how is each person reacting to that? Must be really actually fascinating as an artist, like what people's perspective of your work is. And then to just be able to move on.
Yeah.
And go to the next thing of where your exploration of process and all of that is going to go.
I mean, I frankly really revel in that part of the art making process. And that part of being an artist is that you have to give your work away at a point.
Yes.
And like that can be a scary thing. That can be a beautiful thing. And for me, it is like almost only beauty. It is like, I now get to be connected to other people through this thing that I've put in the world. And I don't dictate I come with my hat in my hands. I'm not trying to tell someone how to think. I'm not trying to tell someone what this is and how they should feel. No one likes that, first of all.
Yeah, exactly.
No one responsible to that. People want to make up their own minds. And for me, that is why I work lean towards a more abstract lens as opposed to like a representational lens. My work is always about the natural world and our relationship to it and the human body and our relationship to the things around us. But I have very little interest personally in sort of like representing things that are already in the world, because I want to like kind of invite people into what is already inside of my head, like what I'm imagining, and see how they feel about it.
Yeah. I don't know if this is just ceramics in particular, but you have a lot of trust in the process of just working through it. To me, it seems like ceramics have a lot of trust. You put something in a kiln, you have no idea what could happen inside of that. I mean, you do to an effect because you've done it for so long, but it's really interesting to me.
Maybe always a collaborative process with the material in a way that other crafts lend itself to, but there's something particular about the time component of ceramics and sort of the object of the kiln and this sort of like archaeological process you are like quasi building inside of a kiln that lends itself to that kind of trust building and relationship building with your process.
There's a looseness to be able to just go with the flow and let it take where it's going to go in the process. And I really admire that, because I find, at least for myself, the older I get, I'm trying to control what this outcome is going to be. And that is the beauty of having where you're at in your life as an artist. We admire that you're letting that go and sharing it with people.
I think that is the vulnerability and the expertise of committing to your work. You are kind of ripping your chest open every once in a while. And like sometimes like that can feel better than you might expect.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But sometimes it is incredibly scary and it doesn't feel so good. But I don't know, that's being alive, right? That is like, I want to be awake. I want to be awake to the world. I want to be awake to my community and my dear people around me and my dear people who aren't around me, my people who are not dear yet. Like, I want to be as aware of what it is to be alive and the gift of those somatic sensations of to like think and feel, but also like sense.
All the senses.
Exactly.
All the senses all at once. Which brings me to a little bit, you're based in New York City. So I know if you don't mind to touch upon also, besides your ceramics work and sculpture work, do you mind me bringing up that you also do some things over SNL, Saturday Night Live?
I do. I studied costume design at the same time I was studying sculpture when I was in university.
What university was that?
I went to the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida.
Okay, we'll go backwards there.
Yeah. So it was a beautiful place to go to school. I mean, my entire family were fish who grew up landlocked, basically.
Okay.
So
Did you grow up in,
we are ocean
were you born
people.
in- Where were okay? Let's sidestep. We'll come back. SNL, not important.
We'll get there. No, I can get there fast. You can
Where
challenge
were you
me.
born?
I'll get there fast.
And where did you grow up at?
I was born in Central Ohio.
Why did I know that in the back of my head?
In a landlocked part of our country. Beautiful place to grow up. Also beautiful place to maybe leave and venture off somewhere else. Yeah, and so I ended up going to the University of Miami just because I was close to the ocean.
Yeah, and
Like,
jumping
literally.
into a pretty fun.
It was a serious culture shock. Miami is an international city, like pinned at the end of our country. And like, it was culture shock for me as a relatively sheltered human. I mean, there were a few signs of this. Like, I initiated going on an exchange program when I was 15 by myself to Sardinia.
To where?
Sardinia. It's an island on the coast of Italy.
In Italy, yes.
Living with a family who did not speak any
That's
English.
me
And I'm
being
just
deaf
like,
again. I love this. So I was obsessed with Italy. It's the same thing as a teenager. So
and again, it was just like, let's go to an island and live with a family I've never met. And like, sure. But also, like, I was weeping on the plane. I was just like, what did I do?
But you're breaking through it. You have that.
Yeah.
It's so,
Yeah.
and it's such a big thing.
Yeah.
Gift to know that you can do this yourself.
Yes, I think back on it now, and I was not encouraged to do this. I was not pushed towards this. I just found this at some point. I was like, I'm going to do that. And I did it. So for that, I feel very fortunate that I was even able to do that. I was asking my dentist to donate money to my trip, that kind of stuff. But I ended up in Miami. Really, I knew it was a good school. I got some good scholarship money. Don't go to college unless you get a ton of scholarship money. Student debt is real. Just a little PSA. Yeah, so I went to the University of Miami. I started pre-med neurobiology because I was that overachieving high school student and didn't really quite know what I wanted to do. Didn't feel like art was practical enough.
I can see some of that in your work. It's very
We go hard.
vertebrae sort of.
Tis true, related to the body, but also like we go hard. We like try and just keep achieving. But I very quickly switched into the theater department. That was the first sort of step to just be like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't want to be in a lab. This is not creative enough.
When you were young, did you have that other outlet too? In
Yes,
the creativity?
definitely.
Did you draw? Was there sewing?
Yeah.
What was that like?
And it was really kind of what I do now. My mother, very fortunately for me, sat me down in front of a sewing machine and was like, here.
Wow.
And so I was making horrible clothes for myself in high school, but I was wearing them.
Yeah.
Like, there was a very quick knack for me to be just like on style.com, like looking at all the runway shows in my study hall. And also I wore a uniform all through school. So like when I didn't have the opportunity to wear the uniform, she was making her outfit.
I think that makes people that had to wear a uniform even more so individualistic and finding that style.
Yeah,
immediately.
exactly. Because we had occasions to dress for, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was sort of like the creative outlets as a child. And I also was like shown theater. Luckily, I was taken to children's theater and exposed to those kinds of things. I also was talking to Dan in another piece of media for the Arts Center that will be posted at some point somewhere about my love of the Muppets, which was started so early. Like Jim Henson's
I was
The
gonna
Muppets.
ask you about that.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
yes,
I'm
you
going to
know.
lead you there already, Molly.
Yep, I do love the puppets, and
Yeah, it was a really early seed with my mother renting videotapes from the Newark Public Library in the town I grew up in of VHS tapes of The Muppet Show from the 70s and early 80s.
we didn't have TV, so it's the same thing. But I did get the Muppet magazine, and I got Miss Piggy's Guide to Life.
Heck
and
yeah.
it was over for me because that was just like,
Right.
It was mostly about the images and the pictures and everything she put in her purse and all the wigs that she wore. So you're just...
So you can thank my dear friend Stefan Rotondaro, who made most of those clothes for Miss Piggy for most of his career. I think this is a much better story than like, you know, talking about music camp as a child. Yeah, I saw the Muppet Show and was just like, what is that? Like, where is that? How do I go there? I'm afraid of what's happening back there, but I want to go do it. Like, it was that
Feeling you
backstage.
exactly.
It was that backstage environment at the Muppet Show where, yeah, we saw the performances, but we also got to see Kermit like come backstage with Scooter.
Well, you don't see that on
Yeah.
normal theater productions or anything like that. So this was our first behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And it looked chaos and it looked fun.
It
and
was
it was
sexy
weird.
and dark
and you're all,
and like, what's happening
this
here?
is before anybody was doing behind the scenes stuff.
Oh, sure.
And it was like,
Yeah. Well, and it's also like completely inappropriate. Like the Muppets were never made for kids. Ever, ever. Particularly the Muppet Show. The first episode was called Death and Sex or something like that.
I love it.
Ah, God, I'm going to get that wrong and Raleigh's going to hurt me. But not hurt me. She's going to hug me. But my dear friend Raleigh Cruson was the first intern at the Henson Company. Still works for them. I know her and I treasure her. Yeah, the Muppets, used get shot out of a cannon. They had teeth. They were scary and violent. That's Sex and Violence. That's the title. Because it was for adults. It was for adults. And it was just this sort of raucous, like farcical you can do things with puppets you can't do with humans. You know what I mean? And it's funny.
Like shoot them out of the cannon.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly. Throw a fish at them, and that's what we want. So I think to be exposed to that, and that speaks to like my parents' sense of humor too. They love that. The Muppets were subversive, they were scary, but they were also like, you wanted to hang out with them. The humor was fast. And so that was like a very big influence on me. And I will blame that for me getting into theater my entire career to where I am to this day.
I think you could say that, the Muppets really parallel SNL. So I'm not surprised.
Well, it's not parallel. They used to be on SNL, Molly.
Well,
do you know the lore?
But it's a very similar, to me, it just seems like the humans on NSL. It's just
SNL, yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah,
as the Muppets.
It's a variety show. It's a variety show. It's the same format. And the Muppets literally were on SNL in the first couple of seasons. And whoever drew the short straw in terms of the writer's pool would have to write for Jim. And that was hard. And this is kind of why they didn't last very long, because nobody knew how to write for puppets except for Jim and his crew. And so that was the tricky part. But also that ends well.
In a crazy way, did you eventually end up over in Puppet World, in Jim Henson's Puppet World?
I did. I'm not planned, but sort of like my little 4 or 5-year-old brain would be just exploded on the wall, Muppet style, if she understood that what I got to do as an adult and what I continue to do as an adult. I was working in Broadway costume shops for quite a while after graduating from my undergraduate education.
When you were in Miami, was it straight
in Miami,
to New York?
and then it was straight to New York. That was not the plan, but if you're looking for theater jobs out of school, that is the more...
That's the place.
Well, it is the place, but it oddly is the more... that's the responsible way to work in the arts in this country.
Yeah.
Because at least there's organizations. There are regional theaters. So there are like these theaters and nonprofits that like keep American theater alive. American theater is in dire straits, but it is living and breathing, even if the heartbeat could be stronger. And so I was able to find a gig with a costume designer where I was his assistant costume designer, and then also making a lot of the things, because I took to that very quickly. I am trained as a costume designer, but I'm also electively learned and like pushed towards studying the technical aspects of like garment building and specifications like that, which gave me more skills. Like to me, that was like, duh, like I don't want to just do research on garment history. Like I want to be able to make these things. Like I'm a better designer if I understand how they're
Absolutely.
how to take them apart, put them back together, and then corrupt them into something wild that no one's ever seen.
That's a strong base.
Yeah.
That's what we always try to promote.
Yes.
With kids that are, even if you're going into trash, and you can get away with gluing some stuff for a while, but if you want to go take that to the next step, you got to learn the 101 of things.
You do,
to
and
be able
there's
to break the rules. You
incredible resources out there, but really, like one of the biggest is your own curiosity. Like if you want to learn how to make something that will fit your body, take apart a thing that fits your body and put it back together. This is the story of curious tinkerers 101 throughout human history. It's like, if you want to learn how to fix this thing or build this thing or invent something, like you start taking it apart first, right?
Yeah.
It's the radio builders. It's everyone
how
who worked at NASA.
Seems like that's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean,
see how it's not working.
Exactly. And then screw it up a bunch of times.
Yes.
You're going to be bad at it for a while.
I love that.
So yeah, I got out of school and I was encouraged to move to New York just on the whim of like, we can get you a job with another costume designer. I'm like, oh, I don't know what that means, but okay, sure. This job is over. So what am I doing next?
When did you come to New York?
I moved in 2008.
Okay.
Back when we said 2000.
I was in New York really briefly, but I was thinking about it today and I'm all, oh my God.
Yeah.
1999. It's early 2000s, but so energy. I mean, I know that you probably go back and forth with that. I just know like New York's where it's at. It's such its own, as you know, energy, and you have a community there and everything. But then do you ever get those senses of like which brings you here into other places that you need to escape and get out into those open, wide spaces?
Definitely. I mean, New York, it's sort of been a functional place for me for such a long time, and it's been very good to me. Like I fully knock on wood, we love her. Like I've never been kicked in the teeth fully. Like just hopefully keep, which is like, it's a hard place to live. It's a hard place to live. But the communities I've built there, and first in the theater community, working in Broadway costume shops, and then shifting into TV and film, just the most talented people, like just people who put their like world-class talent into their little pouch and just never tell you about it and just pop it out whenever they need and like blow your freaking mind.
That sounds like you. So you're in good company, it sounds like.
Well, I mean, I'm nourished by my community, lifted up by my community, and I have so much gratitude because even now, as my sculpture practice has always been concurrent with my garment practice and the costume world that I inhabit. But at this point, like right now, let's say like on this day in October, when we're actually releasing this in November, present time.
Folks, I mean, if you are hearing, you got all the way here.
You got all the way here.
It's really October, but we'll see you in November.
Secrets. But yeah, I mean, I feel so lucky to have these creative streams in my life, but I also have these communities that are just so supportive. And it is really just a matter of being engaged, giving as much away as you can of your creative energy, and it comes back to you in just like tenfold. And yeah, so I just feel super, super fortunate for my costume people to be like rooting so hard for my like sculpture accomplishments, and for my sculpture people to be like, oh my God, what'd you do on SNL? Blah, blah, blah. And like, this is what I've always wanted. This is literally what I've always dreamed of. When I was questioned in undergrad of, you're going to get burnt out if you study these two things so intensely at the same time, like, no, it's going to work out. I swear.
Yeah.
Like it has to. Like they're inextricably linked.
I mean, things are all interwoven. We're designed and told to really like pick a lane, and that's just really not true. And the older we get and the more people we meet, or at least younger people these days, there's so many mediums and there's so many things to, I've always wanted to learn a ton, and I have, and you just have to be open to where it's going to take you. But that just seems interwoven practice.
Definitely.
That really represents who you are.
Yeah, and I have gratitude for those warnings because it is a lot. We are incredibly multifaceted as creative people. It's so much energy. If we are really putting ourselves into these things, it does extract a lot too. But
thank you for saying that.
The hope is that extraction feeds back in. It feeds into your community, but it also feeds back into yourself. And like that is a matter of pacing. I think that's something that I kind of struggled with when I was younger, as a younger creative, and also younger like creative trying to like work for other people and collaborate, but then also do my own thing and that kind of thing, is to just be patient. Be patient, but in this very specific way of like things will unfold. It may take longer than like you might want, or you might not get on this 30 under 30 list or whatever, but it will unfold in the time that it's sort of meant to unfold. And be grateful for that. Like, thank God, because the things that like have been kind of coming into my life recently, I wasn't ready for. If I would have gotten them 10 years ago, was not ready. The work would have been trash. It just like wasn't flushed yet. I have a long gestation time for a lot of my work. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm working on the studio, like physically, you can see it. It's in my brain for a long time, and it needs that time to kind of feel like the right time to emerge. And so that's the patience I'm talking about. Be patient with yourself, make your favorite things. And if your favorite things aren't ready to be shown to people, it's fine. Please show them at some time. Please show them. Give them to us. This is the gift that we get.
See, like, I mean, I must have like a million notes in here from the last, 8-10 years.
Yeah.
That it's funny to see it, as you said, be patient and unfold in a strange way, but unfold in the way that it's supposed to years later.
Yeah.
I go back there and I'm like, oh my God, I did that. We did that. But it's not a checklist. You need to trust the world that you'll be emotionally ready for when that thing is taking place.
Yeah. I have a practice that I teach all of my students, and I do in my studio, that I was taught by one of my incredible professors in college, Marie Herman Herwold, where we start every session with 10 things. So we just list the 10 things that are on my mind. One, it's a way for us to like be in community and have a couple like conscious breaths together before we start our practice in class and kind of gather and also let go of what you need to for the day, but also to sort of begin to archive what your gestational periods look like, because then over the course of a semester or a year or 8 weeks or 4 months or 3 years, you start to build this beautiful archive of where your brain is living at any given moment at any given time. And so many of my students, and I had a moment as well in undergrad where I was like, of course I'm making all of this work about this thing, like, because it's coming up in my daily life every single day in the way that I'm cultivating it, the way I'm thinking about it, and the way I'm looking at it in the studio. But also for very many people, it becomes a way to like point to the things that they don't realize or that they're working with subconsciously or that are sort of like in the beginnings of bubbling into their consciousness, but they've been sort of sitting on and chewing on throughout their days, but not in active practice in the studio. So I encourage everybody to do that.
I feel like the key word on this episode is gestation. Trust the gestation process, right?
Yeah.
Kate, when's your birthday?
I'm born on Valentine's Day.
Oh,
I didn't know that.
I mean, this is very California. I'm sorry, New York City. I'm all Aquarius. Yeah. But
Carrier
amazing.
of water.
My daughter's an Aquarius, and some of the most amazing, interesting people are Aquarians.
I'll take it. Also, like unofficial ambassador of love.
We're Taurians, so gestation is our middle name.
Nice.
Yeah, we like to sit in one spot for a while.
To make sure it's going to be complete. So anyway, you're back on SNL. Congratulations on the work.
you.
Do you have more work coming up? I did take a look at the episode. You're part of, shall I say, is it prop making and costume making?
Those are two very different and very fleshed out teams. It is a very big staff.
Because I looked at the credits and I was like, which one is
don't look
she
at the credits. Don't look at the credits because most of us are not in it.
No, I noticed that, Kate, but I imagine there's teams underneath people that are getting the actual in the credits.
Definitely.
So knowing that you're there.
Well, this is a plug for me to get just ceremonially be put in the credits this season.
Yeah,
like just one time for the film unit, maybe. So we're back at SNL for season 50. It's a big one. Every show has been just like bigger than the last, but that is sort of the way that seasons have been going. This is my 8th season with the show. I feel very fortunate to be staff.
Yeah.
To come back year after year.
What's some of your favorite projects that you've made on there?
I have had the good fortune to make a ton of things for an update.
Okay.
So a lot of times if there's like a weird animal or a weird like feeling or natural phenomenon that someone is dressed up as, I'm usually tasked with those kinds of things. This is sort of like my puppet and costume
coming together,
baby.
Don't stay in one lane, folks.
Do not do it. Yeah. So I work on a really beautiful team of about 6 tailors, and then we work with the costume designers, who is like a very closely related team to us in collaboration. And then there's a whole bigger team of costumers who each individual you see on the show has one person at least with them, putting them in the clothes, making sure they're wearing the right thing, doing the quick changes, like ushering them around the studio throughout the show.
I imagine just the pace of that show, this is a really condensed process.
Oh, yeah.
They're really quick, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So your timing when you're going to work on these things, it's just long days.
It's very long days. We work about 45 to 50 hours at minimum over the course of 3 days.
Wow.
Because the format of the week has kind of been the same for a very long time, where they're writing from Monday to Wednesday. There's a read through on Wednesday night with the whole cast and the guest. And then Wednesday night, very, very late, there's a sense of what everyone needs to build for the show. And that means costumes, props, scenery starts getting built on Wednesday night.
So done in 3 days.
Yeah. Makeup, special effects makeup, all that kind of stuff. Hair, wigs. Wigs get made every week. Hand-tied.
Wow.
It's wild. So we really begin our work on Thursdays, and I certainly can't speak to the minutia of each and every department, but the departments are flushed with the best in the business. Absolutely. Like, you can't do this work unless you are really know your stuff. And there are different ways to work in the film industry and in TV, but this is a very specific one, and it's for some people and it's not for other people. It doesn't mean you're bad if you can't do this, but it's you can do this or you can't do this kind of gig. And so we just work really fast. But that also means that you trust your team with your life, basically. No bus has ever hit me. You know what I mean? No one's ever going to throw me under one because the cogs are so well oiled.
True teamwork.
Yeah. So I feel so lucky for that.
This is another, if that is intriguing to anyone out there, just goes to say that how you got here is taking everything apart, learning those rules, because what comes with rebuilding that and really knowing whatever your medium is, really knowing it inside and out, makes you fast. It makes you have the ability to be on an ultra professional level, because speed. I know this from flowers. That's only really from doing that for a million years.
Yeah.
Speed comes with knowing things inside and out.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that you're rushing through your work, which, in some cases you are,
a different way,
but it's a matter of moving with confidence and moving without second guessing and asking for what you need, delegating if you need to delegate, hey, I need a hand on this. Hey, can you do this part? I've mentally worked it out. Can you make this? Or I haven't mentally worked it out. Can you mentally work it out? And just being able to kind of move through the process with a fluidity.
That's a good point. Yeah. I like that. That's a lot better than the word speed, because that really is what gives you that.
I mean, you are also scream sewing sometimes. That's sometimes the job of just we have 70 minutes to make Kamala Harris the specific outfit that she wore 70 minutes ago and put it on live TV. True story.
Can imagine.
Yeah.
A lot of stories. I'm sure we could just go have a whole other episode on that.
I will bring it back. It makes me very good at my work. In my studio, because, and I will just say that with as much humility, that did not sound humble.
No.
It just makes me remember my endurance for process, for product. Sometimes I'm stuck in my own studio, or I'm teetering on the edge of a few things and just what do I do now? Yeah. Just no, make a decision. That's me banging on the table. It's make a decision. If you can do this for other people, you deserve to give it to yourself. And I think that's the beauty of working for other people. In the art world, it's a lot of times you have another job, or you do other things for other people, or you contribute your creativity to other streams. And that's been looked down upon for some GD reason for so long. And it's just no way. This is my endurance. This is my athleticism within creativity.
That is a really
you know what I mean?
Point. And I'm taking that to heart right now, because Meg and I often, we have those conflicts just working at such a creative place and so much going on. Where's the time for your own creativity? But it does help time manage, should I say, in a way, and get around to it instead of, you only have so much time. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a time management piece, but there's also this. I like fabricating my work. A lot of people, I mean, if you have the funding or you don't have the time or something, you hire other people to potentially help you make the work. I love making the work. That is my treat. That is my treat. And it is because I have learned these skills working for other people or working with other people that I know how to make molds in silicone. I know how to make things out of foam and fur and all this stuff. And that just teaches me how materials behave and what's possible and what I've seen things do and think they could do but never seen. It just brings up all these other questions and pushes me into realms I would never touch on my own. That is just such an incredible cross training. I have a dream part-time job, and that is something I treasure. Even outside of the practicalities that I have health insurance. I am in a union and I have health insurance, and I have a 401k, because I'm in a union, because I'm in this other creative field. And there is something about boundaries, I think, that sometimes I have been in the environments where it just feels too extractive, where it's just I'm just using just enough of my own creativity that I'm burnt out at the end of the day to kind of rethink into my own work. And I've been through periods of that, and I stay away from them as much as possible now.
That's when the running comes into place.
Yeah.
Like channeling how to bring that back when it gets tapped out of you. So,
totally.
Yeah.
But so I think it's a boundaries issue, but I think it's also like feels like a privilege to get to work in those spaces because it is so generative for me because I kind of have trained myself to do that. How do I get something out of this for me? And I don't mean that extractively, only in a creative way, only in the sort of like, how do I get my brain to think differently, or how do I get my brain to think more expansively by this task? We love parameters. You just like get to problem solve this thing. I mean, that's all artists do is problem solve. A lot of times we just make our own problems and solve our way out.
Absolutely.
But
there's something to be said for being given the problem,
you're putting it back together,
and solving it.
Totally. But like those things have merged so closely for me at this point, where it's like if someone's giving me the problem, or I'm setting my own sort of parameter problem to solve, they feel so similar.
This has been amazing. I feel like this could be a 3-hour podcast.
I know, we could just keep going.
I feel like I've been talking a lot.
No, it's really wonderful. And Kate, I'm glad really haven't had an opportunity to sit down and talk to you. And I hope people really respond and listen to this whole thing because it's just fascinating. And not just what you're doing now, but I see like where you're going in the future and where you'll be as, an old lady and that kind of stuff.
Grandmother of American sculpture. That's what we want.
I love it. Kate the Explorer, grandmother
Molly, this is such a pleasure.
Of the American sculpture. This is wonderful. Again, if you made it to here, where can they find you on Instagram?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at the Kate Rusek, TheKaterusek on Instagram.
Thank you, folks, for listening. And if you've heard this in the future, well, you know where to find Kate and her work. Please go on the journey with her and see where this is all going. And I hope you got some great sound advice out of this.
Thank you so much, Molly. This was such a treat.
Kate. Thanks, Meg.
I didn't even say much, but you guys held your own in a way. I was like, I just get to sit back. I get to observe and listen and enjoy as much as the audience members. So
wonderful. Thank you.